So we've heard big data, it's a buzzword, and everybody's talking about it. But what I hope to do today is really put a little bit of substance around the bones so that you have a feeling as to why big data is disruptive and just how is it different to what I'm already doing today. So I'm going to take you on a little journey down the road to personalisation. This is just one application of big data, but I feel it's one that's very exciting and it's one that's close to my heart. So the first thing is, what is personalisation? So we had a glimpse of it from Hass, personalisation around what offers we get on our Woolworths app. But to really understand the true magnitude of personalisation, we need to look to the forefather of personalisation. This was a company that made internet search work. I don't know if any of you are old, I guess probably actually most of the people in this room would be old enough to remember what it was like to use Hotbot or Alta Vista or any of the other first generation search engines. You would spend hours trawling through meaningless search results to find that nugget of gold. And then came along Google. So this is me searching on Google. I've logged in. You can see that's my email address up there. And I've logged into Google+. And I start typing a search term, growing long. So Google's preempting what I'm looking for. So the first one is growing long hair. Well, I used to have long hair, but I had a haircut, so it's no longer relevant to me. Growing long hair to men. Well, that's somewhat personalized to me because it knows that I'm a male. I've never told Google that I'm a male, but it's inferred that, it's worked that out. Then on the third on the list is really interesting. Growing longan. Who knows what a longan is? I bet you most of the people in the audience don't. Does anybody know what a longan actually is? It's a fruit, fantastic. So longan is an exotic tropical fruit and actually grows prolifically in Southeast Asia. I love exotic tropical fruits. And Google has inferred that. Not because I've told it that I love exotic tropical fruits, but just from the sorts of things that I've been searching for, and I can tell you that I haven't searched for longan before. It's worked out that I may be interested in longan. But why would I be interested in growing longan? Well, to really understand that, there are some other search terms which I've given Google, and they're exposed when I look to personalisation on my favourite e-tailer, Amazon. So as soon as I log into Amazon, this is what I get. A prolific assortment of tantalizing products that would assist my hydroponic gardening hobby. So Amazon knows that I'm very interested in hydroponics. And in fact, I am. My garage is full of plants, under artificial lighting. And how does Amazon know this? Well, Amazon knows this because I happen to buy 1 or 2 books on mixing up plant hormones and a couple of other things. But just from those 2 books, it's able to recommend a whole range of products that I may be interested in. So how did it do that? Well, that result of personalisation has come out through a process which is called collaborative filtering. So it's had a look at what I'm interested in, what I've bought from Amazon, and it's had a look at what everybody else has bought through Amazon. And based on the collaborative community, it's been able to construct what I may be interested in. And so it's been able to give me recommendations on items which I have not purchased from Amazon before, such as, Hydrotron, which is a substrate for growing plants. So this is truly delightful personalization. In engaging in Amazon, I feel very intimate. So it goes back to what Michael said, customer intimacy. I feel very intimately engaged with this e-tailer. I've never met Amazon, I don't know who Amazon is, but it's a wonderful shopping experience. Now, there are some leaders in the bricks and mortar space, but I think you'll all agree where Amazon has got to, where Google has got to, is way ahead of where our supermarkets have got to, where our banks have got to, where our telcos have got to. But they are catching up quickly, and big data is a disruptive technology which is going to get them there. So to understand why it's taking so long to catch up and why it's actually hard work, let me take you a step back in time to when personalization actually existed in enterprise. So let's go back to the supermarket example. So this is what it used to be like shopping at a supermarket 70 years ago. You'd walk into a supermarket and Barry, the guy in the white coat behind the counter, he knew you. In fact, he knew every one of his customers. So he knew that when Johnny came in, he was the bachelor, he always eats at the pub, all he wants is either insect repellent or lighter fuel. Who knows why he wanted insect repellent, but lighter fuel you could probably infer. On the other hand, when Marjorie came in, she's got some kids, they're at school, okay? He knows all about her. So in trying to promote a new line of butter that he's just secured from the dairy 10 kilometres away, he knows how to sell that butter. He knows that there's no point in offering the butter to the bachelor guy, because the bachelor guy's not going to see that as relevant. That's not personal. Okay, that's irrelevant and it's just noise. But he knows that Maggie's going to be very interested. And he also knows that if the school fete is on next Saturday, then he can upsell her probably on £2. This level of intimacy was absolutely critical in actually driving the business forward and making the customer feel relevant and heard. But then there was progress. Then there was this notion that customers want 50 or 100 different brands for each cereal that they like to buy and so forth. And so from the guy behind the counter and the little store on the corner, that disappeared very quickly, and we went to these great big supermarkets where we've got hundreds and hundreds of products, if not thousands. And we introduced the idea of self-serve. And when the first supermarket opened in North Balwyn in the 1950s, the guys in the white coat were not welcome there. They couldn't work in that environment. And the first supermarket did not make you sign up to some club and say, well, look, I need to know who you are and what you need, so you sign up to a club, and when you come in, you can have a little 5-minute chat with me, and we can work out what you need, and then I can direct you to the right aisle. And unfortunately, back then, we didn't have iPhones, and we didn't have digital channels, and we didn't have the ability to work out in a very efficient way what people were buying. So, for many decades, customers felt unheard. Customers felt like they're on their own. And really, shopping became very commoditized. See, the switching costs when you're dealing with Barry behind the counter was pretty high, because you'd hate to go into another store where they didn't know what you wanted. But when you go to a supermarket, well, it's just like any other supermarket. So how do we change this? Well, the concept was contextual marketing. And the concept was based on the idea that, there are groups of people that are similar. So we need really 2 teams in our organisation to make contextual marketing work. A group of very good-looking people, the marketeers, and then a group of really smart people who make up with their intelligence the analysts. I hate to say that I'm one of the analysts, but unfortunately I am. Now, the concept was that the marketeers were the innovators. They came up with the concepts. How do I reach out to my customers? How do I drive my business forward? What products do I need? What promotions do I run? What specials do I have? How do I treat a customer preferentially? They came up with those ideas. But then we need to work out, well, it can't just be one offer or one product for everybody. That's not going to work. So what we'll do is we'll get the smart guys, not to say that the marketing people aren't smart people, they've just got different skills, the smart guys to carve up the population. And the way we did that is we started things like loyalty schemes, and we collected information about the customers, such as their age, their gender, their postcode. And then we married that up with exactly what they were buying and when they were spending their money. Now, the clever people, the analysts, what they would do is they would work out, what are the critical variables that describe a segment? So is it age? Is it where they live? Is it how rich that particular suburb is? And from that, they could construct a set of business rules, okay, which defined what segment a customer was in. And this was the customer's context. Now, of course, the next step is we've got a segment, but we've got to work out which offers actually work on which segment. So we had this concept of A/B testing. And this is where we took all of our innovations around product and offers, and we actually tested them on a subset of each segment. And out of all of the products and offers, we worked out which one worked for each segment. So that would take some time, so some weeks. And then based on that, we can go, right, so now we know how to target our customers with this particular product that we're trying to promote. All we need to do is just go through the business rules based on what the analysts have told us defines that segment. We pick the winning product or promotion, and off we go to a live campaign, and success will follow. Well, that was true in some cases, but only to a certain extent. And as you can see, things don't always work out as you expect. Two things can go wrong. Either we don't get the sort of response that we would like. Maybe only 10 or 15% of the people are taking it up. But why? We've been so clever about how we carved up the population. It's such a narrow sliver of a segment. And the second thing that we found, which was really interesting, was, well, maybe we would get good performance for some time, but then there'll be certain days when things didn't work so well, or after a while, what was working stops working. We've got to understand why. So let's just zoom in and try and understand why those two things happen. Well, firstly, let's understand why some people in a segment do take up an offer and why some people don't, because this will be a really good introduction to why we need to go down the big data path. So in doing that, let's talk about Kate and James. So Kate and James are two young professionals. Kate shops Saturday mornings, James all over the place, but usually late at night. They both come from beachside or waterside suburbs, so they obviously know where the good form of life is. And one thing that we notice is that they both cook at home Asian cooking. Now, why is Asian cooking important in defining this segment, Asian cooking at home? Well, it just so happens that the smart people that we had worked out that there was a high correlation between Asian cooking and the types of products that we're interested in promoting here, which in this case was the new Lior coffee capsules that you can use in your Nespresso machine. Now that's an odd correlation, we say to our analytics team, but they say, just trust me on this. We've looked at about 100 variables, and this one comes out of our shopping basket analysis. It's in the top 3. So we go ahead and make our offer for special on Lior coffee capsules. You can use them in your Nespresso machine. They're good. Now, what we find is that Kate doesn't take up the offer, but James does. So we want to work out what's going on. Could our analysts be wrong? So we go and zoom into that segment, and we identify Kate and James. And we speak to Kate and we say, well, why didn't you take up this offer? Do you just not have an espresso machine? She goes, no, it's not that. But the fact of the matter is that I drink tea, not coffee. I buy a lot of green tea. I like drinking tea. But then we say to her, but hold on, you've got coffee in your shopping baskets. You know, you buy instant coffee. Why do you buy instant coffee if you just drink tea? And the response is, well, I buy that for my guests, and you'll notice that I only buy it on a very ad hoc manner. In contrast, James, yep, he takes up that offer. So we're very happy about that. So we get a reasonable response rate. What this tells us is that there are some attributes about Kate which we actually had in our data, but which the analysts were unable to really identify. And that's because this particular attribute was not very prominent, not as prominent as we would have hoped. So our analysts, who are working at a human scale, trawling through the data using the tools that they had, were unable to identify that manually. Let's look at the second problem that occurs. So James, after 6 months, stops buying the Lior Espresso coffee capsules. He was regularly buying them every week. Why does he stop buying them? What's changed? Does he not drink coffee anymore? So we go and speak to James. James tells us, well, actually, the only reason that I bought them was because it was convenient. I shop all of the time, you know, all over the place. It was convenient, it was there. But the reality is, I have tasted the original ones. They came with the machine, and I prefer them. And it just so happens that he tells us that a Nespresso shop has just opened up in his local shopping centre. So he prefers to go there. So what this is telling us now is that there is something that has occurred in his environment which has changed his behavior. And so the business rules that we had hand-constructed and had trained up through our A/B testing have now aged. They're no longer relevant in this particular postcode for this particular type of client. So we want to summarize what's going on here. The reality is that the consumer today is living in this VUCA world that it was badged by Bill. We've really got a whole lot of factors which are influencing what a consumer or customer does. Firstly, we have real-time information feeds now. So unlike before, customers are looking at social networking to understand what is working for their peers and gaining recommendations for their peers. They're also influenced by a range of environmental factors, such as things like the weather, special events. Your shopping behaviour changes on Australia Day. Competitors, what your competitors are doing really does drive a lot of your customer behaviour. So what promotions they're running. And what you have to do is you have to be able to adapt in real time to all of these external influences on your consumers and personalise the experience that you offer your consumers through every channel that you have. Whether it be a mobile app, whether it be an online web page, whether it be at a point of sale or a call centre. You want to be seen as relevant, timely, and always there intimately understanding the consumer to offer the right thing at the right time. And this is the challenge that big data really can address. And how does it do that? Well, big data is an opportunity for us now to draw on all of these influences, all of these product systems, and ingest them all into one place. So things like web pages produce weblogs. Things like mobile phones and mobile apps, they produce mobile telemetry. Point of sale machines produce point of sale logs. These can all be ingested in one place. But now we've got the data, reams of data. How do we solve the problem that the analyst has always faced for decades? How do I work with all of this data? How do I extract not the gold nuggets, but the gold dust, which tells me about my consumers? You see, I can't afford anymore to be trawling over data assets at a human scale, manually trying to pick out some crazy variable like how often they buy tea, or when they buy tea, or when they buy coffee, or how irregularly they buy coffee. That's out of the question. And take that from point of sale data to mobile data, where you've got people doing things in locations, like what do they do here versus what do they do there. So we can't go down the coarse, static, expensive approach of just relying on human scale techniques. What we need is to employ something disruptive. And the internet properties discovered that this was absolutely necessary a decade ago. And what was that vital ingredient? Well, before I get onto that, I just want to elaborate on just the scale of the problem. So we talked about a whole range of different data assets, and now I want to really just deep dive into exactly what we can gain out of these assets. So free text, and free text is generated on a range of different channels. It could be through your call center, through a CRM system. It could be through a complaints system, either web or social media, or it could be for a suggestion system. So what information can we get out of text? Well, text is a really hard piece of data to work with, because as you know, language is very complex. People can say things in many, many different ways. So from that, we need to have some facility that will enable us to actually extract out what people are talking about and how they feel about what they're talking about. So the sentiment and the topics. The second class of data assets are what we call transactional. So this is what gets generated at like point of sale system, so what people are buying at the checkout. If it's a telco, it may be call detail records, so who people are calling and for how long. Okay? And what that tells us is a lot about the customer's behaviour, so what they're buying, who are their friends, and what they're using their telephone for. mobile is a very interesting source of data. So through mobile, we can extract out some location information, what people are doing and how they behave, conditional on the location that they're in. And finally, web produces a great class of data assets, because web is one of the few, although it is in mobile as well, which enables us to actually see what people's intention are. So when you actually surf over a web page, you dwell on things. You may not buy them, but we can see how long you dwell on them, and that indicates a lot about the intention. All of these things are measurements. They're measuring customer behavior. Now, from these measurements, we need to extract out what we call a latent truth. And what a latent truth is what a consumer or customer actually needs and wants at any particular point in time. So now I get back to what was the key ingredient. What was the key ingredient that the internet properties like Google discovered a decade ago? It was machine learning. Machine learning has been around for decades, but it's been a science which has been confined to the research halls of the Ivy League universities around the world. It's really the evolution of artificial intelligence, but there's no black magic to it. It's actually somewhat similar to what our analytics people have been doing for decades, but an extension to automate that and take out the manual human labour out of analytics. So using machine learning, we can extract out signals or variables or features about our customer. And from that, from all of our data assets, we can build up a single view of the customer, a single contextual record or behavioural DNA, which really describes what our customer's current situation is right now. Now, once we have that rich record, which may contain hundreds of thousands, if not millions of variables, then we've got to solve the problem of which ones matter to the particular business outcome which I'm trying to predict. So for that, machine learning has a solution. And the solution that it takes is it says, well, I've got one of these very long behavioural DNA records for each of my consumers. And what I also can then do is observe what works for a particular consumer and what doesn't work. And so then the algorithms can look at what are the subtle patterns in those hundreds of thousands of variables which actually predict or correspond to a business event occurring in the future. And what it will do is it will actually pick out the specks of gold in that behavioural DNA, which are the predictive ones, automatically. So now we no longer have the arduous task of having to do this manually. And what that means is that we can take our segment sizes from really large and reduce them down to almost one, or very small groups of customers who are very, very similar. And so we can be very, very targeted and relevant. Also, we've removed the static nature of the problem. Now we can do this automatically. And as a result of that, we can be doing it on a continual basis. And that's critical, because what that means is that when an espresso shop does open, we can adapt and we can respond to that change in the environment and respond to changing customer behaviour and target the customer properly. So this sounds like complex science, but as was mentioned earlier this morning, we're seeing a trend. Everything is going to become a platform, and this is just one of those things that is being pushed to the cloud and becoming a hosted platform. So there are many groups, such as my group, who have packaged up the complexity of machine learning and big data feature extraction into a single package and moved it onto the cloud. So as an organisation, you can now focus on doing the marketing, doing the product design, doing the innovation, and sending those things into this machine, which then takes the data and the responses of the customers to work out what's the best and most relevant piece of advice or offer or product for a particular customer at one point in time. But in order to leverage a platform like that, you've got to ask yourself, is your enterprise ready for personalisation? Is your enterprise ready to provide personal customer interactions? The first thing is, do you have an omni-channel strategy? So we've heard Katrina talk about omni-channel and being able to reach your customers in a very intimate way across your channels. If you haven't invested in a mobile channel, and if you haven't rolled those changes across your other channels, then you may not be ready for personalisation. Because you, for example, may make an offer on your mobile channel, but not be able to fulfill it when the customer comes in store. And so that's a change management problem, a key part of any channel strategy. Is your organisation ready for sophisticated channels which can reach your customers and work with your customers? And the middle challenge is, do you have the plumbing in place? So if we go back to the example of Barry and the store, he was plumbed into everything. He was plumbed into his consumers, he was plumbed into his inventory management, and he was plumbed into just what people were buying. As an organisation, do you have that plumbing so you can aggregate those data sources into a single platform, which can then drive your personalisation strategy? Thank you very much. I'll just take a few minutes for questions if anyone has any. I think there's one there.
Rami, it's Katrina. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, in the Australian business community, how many organisations or what percentage do you think are really ready and poised to seriously look at big data as a strategy?
Thank you for the question. So the readiness of organisations today is, I guess, best reflected by who has active big data projects underway. And I guess having worked now with Australian Enterprise for a couple of years on this very topic, I can tell you that it's not many. And the reason why it's not many is because it's actually hard work from the IT side. You've got to get the plumbing right, okay? To get the plumbing is non-trivial. But then there's the IT side, and that can be solved. I mean, we've got technical people, and we can solve those problems, you know, with the right people in the right place. But then we've got to get the change management side right and the channel side right. And that is a challenge, which I think, from my experience, very few, but only the leading organisations in Australia are really taking that seriously and investing serious resources. And they're going to be caught by surprise, in my view, because the organisations which do get that right and do actually have that relationship with the customer and grow that relationship with the customer, I mean, as Michael referred to this morning, it's going to be absolutely critical, are going to leapfrog. And if we see an organisation like Google, the reason why Google can disrupt any vertical potentially in Australia, you know, from banking, from telco, from retail, is because they've got a single channel right now, and they've got that right. So it's pretty easy for them to now branch out into other verticals if they can maintain their consumers on that single channel. Okay? And so I think that this is really where the threat is. Thank you for the question. Any others? No?
Okay, so if you can say, which companies are doing big data in Australia now?
I prefer not to say, because I am engaged with a few, which I shouldn't really, I'm not comfortable with talking about.
What about industries?
Industries, we're seeing the most serious work occurring in financial services. We're seeing a very strong incumbent need and, I guess, focus within telco. And I think that you know, telco is definitely there, and the opportunity in telco is extremely well defined and rich. However, I'd say that right now, a true big data approach, as opposed to sophisticated analytics, customer analytics, I would say that right now banking is probably at the forefront.
Yeah, Rami, just a question here. The collection of this data is happening by so many different organisations, or the target is to have it being collected from every app you download wants your location information.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a convergence happening, or do you predict a convergence happening where you will have a few owners of the data of everybody, and how is that going to start affecting privacy and things like that?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that question. So I think there's two aspects here. There's data collection, and companies, look, big data has existed for decades. Companies have been collecting data, web logs, mobile logs, from product systems, backups, for a decade, okay? And it's going to continue, and there's just a lot more focus now on actually keeping things forever as opposed to keeping things just until they're moved to the data warehouse. So collection is one aspect. The second aspect, which is really important, is analysis, analytics, actually using that data to actually drive the business. That's really where we're at pioneering days right now. That's what big data is about. Big data is not about data generation or collection. Big data is about analysing the data. So the question that you've asked is, well, all of these companies are collecting data, okay? Does it make sense? I mean, should they share data? How should they share data? And where does privacy fit in? So what I'd like to say on that is, what's going to happen first is companies are going to start using that data to offer personalised services and better serve the consumer. And at that point in time, I think there's a real opportunity. There's a real opportunity to say to a consumer, I'm going to now give you control over what I know about you. And I'm going to say to the consumer, you can tell me whether you want me to use what I know about you to do what. Like, do you want me to use that information to better serve you when you ring me when you have a problem? Do you want me to use that information to serve you products in a sorted manner, which is relevant to you? Do you want me to send you targeted promotions? And when the consumer has that control, then the next question that you've got to ask is, why not then centralise that? So as a consumer, I now take ownership of what you know about me, okay? And as a consumer, I can then go to another organisation, which I haven't dealt with before. Say, for example, I'm now really interested in superannuation because I'm getting close to retirement. Then I want to be able to go to my super company and say, hey, you know, my telco knows a lot about me, my bank knows a lot about me, and you know what? Spare me the hassle of me telling you all about me, okay? I'm going to give you the right to understand what they know about me so that you can offer me the right advice. That is a utopia which we're striving to, where privacy is turned on its head by giving the consumer the control. If there are no more questions, I think we're short of time. So, one more question?
I'm very interested in this data protection issue. I'm actually a lawyer, and I've actually been thinking about that very concept that you've just been discussing. Do you envisage that that the individuals might actually not just want better products and services as a result of allowing you to use their data or transfer their data to a third party, mm-hmm. but perhaps actually wanting you to pay them for their data? Particularly if you're going to centralise it, because essentially you're making money from their data.
Yes, yeah. Yes. That's a good question, but I think it's probably more a suggestion. And I'll have to say that I have heard that, I guess, business model being circulated, I guess, within the community. And whether we'll get there or not, it's hard to know. Of course, an individual's identity is worth a lot of money today. I mean, organisations pay third parties huge amounts of money for any skerricks of information that they have. But to have an individual actually monetize their personal identity, then really, in my view, and this is just a personal opinion, comes back down to, are you taking from Peter to give to Paul? Because, you know, I will sell you my identity so that you can better target products back to me. But then does that mean that you're just going to charge me more? Or does that mean that I am making the world less competitive because in a way I'm pre-selecting my vendors? So these are the sort of questions that have gone around in my head, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think that that's an absolutely feasible outcome in this whole journey. Sure. It's a community forum.
Okay, so that model exists. There's a couple of companies in Denmark that do it, so more in Europe than here, where it's this notion of personalisation goes into, we'll all eventually have our own personal cloud, and we make our profiles available to organisations we trust. But then there are a number of, they're called bureaus in Europe, where you can actually, for a commercial value, provide your personal data to organisations, and they will pay you for it in order to service you. So that is already happening, whether, as Rami says, that's inevitably a good thing for those of us in the personalisation or not, but it is happening now, so it's a great observation.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll stop talking now.
Thanks for your time.